billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. My brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And once again, jazakumullah khair, and thank you for joining I Play Islam, Ramadan Revival, juz number 14. And inshallah today my brother here next to me is going to be going through Surah Al-Hijr and the lessons we can take from that. But before that, inshallah, he's going to recite some of the verses from this beautiful surah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام را تلك آيات الكتاب وقرآن مبين ربما يود الذين كفروا لو كانوا مسلمين ذرهم يأكلوا ويتمتعوا ويلههم الأمل فسوف يعلمون وما أهلكنا من قرية إلا ولها كتاب معلوم ما تسبق من أمة أجلها وما يستأخرون صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah, bro. Wow, that was beautiful, mashallah. So, bro, tell us, what are the lessons that we can take from these verses, inshallah?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, as we're all aware, many of the verses of the Quran, when we come across them, they will come in the context of ideological struggle that's taking place within Mecca. So, the Makki verses, right? Okay. So there will often be, one group which is the Quraysh, and the other group which is the Muslims, engaging and giving different outlooks, you could say, or narratives or points across to each other to present each of their respective belief systems as the way of life as something better. Okay. So the Quraysh will come along and say, no, what you're saying is really bad. This is the way to go about it. And the Muslims say, no, what you're doing is really bad. This is the way which you need to go about it, right? Okay. And Surah Hijr is an example of that. It's got that same theme to it. Okay. And in particular, in this instance, it's talking about the validity of the Quran, because the Quraysh have made a claim against it, and so Surah Hijr came about in response to that. Right? So, and by doing so, what it does is it highlights the opposition, the nature of the opposition rather, towards Islam. So the nature of it as a whole. Right? So, just from observation, right, what you'll find from many of the kuffar, such as, the politicians and Islamophobes, you'll find that they're very confident and very stubborn in the allegations they'll put across, and you can just tell from their tone. So,
what do you mean by that exactly?
So, for example, you might find from the media or from politicians such as David Cameron, for instance, right, always making these outrageous claims against Islam, right? So, Islam is oppressive towards women, or Islam is barbaric, or the Muslims are coming with their creeping Sharia, right? They're coming, Islam promotes terrorism and all these policies that come on the back of that, right? So all these absurd claims against that, and on the back of that, you'll also find many responses coming from Muslims. So you'll find various styles and means adopted by different members of the community to clarify these misconceptions, and that's what it's largely built upon, misconceptions, right? Okay. So you'll find them always trying to clarify these points, but despite these clarifications, whatever you want to put out there's always this stubbornness and this push to put these claims across. So what Surah Hijr does in effect is it responds to these, this arrogance and this stubbornness, and where they're still making these bad claims, and it's saying, رُبَمَا يَوَدُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ كَانُوا مُسْلِمِينَ. So you can make as much of these bad claims as you want, you can be as stubborn as you want, but at the end of it, you're the ones who are going to be wishing that you were the Muslims, right? So by the end of it, when it comes down to it, right? So it turns the tables, because it's, on the one hand you've got these secular ideologues who are looking down towards Islam, presenting their way of life as the best, and Surah Hijr, what it does is it turns it around towards them, and it's actually looking down on them now, in almost a pitiful way. And it's highlighting that actually this irrational criticism that it's got towards Islam is not going to get them anywhere, and in fact it's only going to show just how desperate they actually are in attacking and opposing Islam.
So, bro, how does that link with Ramadan exactly?
So, the verses continue, and it addresses the nature of this alternative to Islam. So if Islam is this invalid, backward kind of religion, right? And that you're opposing, and you're thinking, okay, it isn't as well as good as my ideology.
Yeah.
So what is the alternative to the Islamic outlook? And the alternative, as we know, even when we refer to the point before Islam actually came down to pre-Islamic Arabia, what do we often refer it to as? We refer it to as the Jahiliyyah period, right?
Yeah, meaning like not Islamic.
Yeah, and un-Islamic. We call it the Jahiliyyah period because the Jahiliyyah period effectively means, call it Jahiliyyah means ignorance, right? But in a rough translation, but we're talking about the absence of Allah from life affairs because of the incorrect belief, right? If you're not correctly believing in Allah and you're not believing in submitting to Allah's will, then the alternative to that is what? It's the freedom. The opposite of submission is freedom. You're going to do what you want and you're going to say what you want, right? So the way that this surah addresses this issue of Jahiliyyah is it highlights the following of the blind following of your own desires that come on the back of it, right? So it says, let them eat and enjoy themselves, and let their hopes beguile them, for surely they will come to know, right? So in the context of Ramadan, as you ask, right, it's imagine, right, you're thinking, how many times has it been where you're talking to a non-Muslim, right, and Ramadan's come up, they might offer you something, or anything could happen, right, or there's always something where you're going to interact, as naturally in a society that's full of non-Muslims, you're naturally going to interact with them and discuss about your deen, obviously as a Muslim, right? So obviously the discussions always come with all of us where you're talking about Ramadan and you're going to explain to them what fasting is, and you're going to tell them about how abstain from every year, right? Really? How you abstain from every from all food and all drink for the whole of daylight hours for 30 days or so, right? And what's the usual response to that? What? I could never do that. Yeah, so you're doing for 30 days, a whole day, no food, no drink. What? Really? What? Not even water. Yeah. So they're very surprised, and they find it as a very weird thing that you're not living your life to the max, or you're not living by that freedom. Yeah. You're actually submitting to something else, to something greater. Yeah. So that's looked at as a very weird thing. Yeah, because they don't actually seem to understand. They don't get that. There's such a thing as doing that, right? Or you can live without, living exactly, and living without an animalistic kind of lifestyle, you could say, right? So animalistic lifestyle, you're effectively telling a society to go and do whatever it wants as long as it can get away with it. That's what they do, isn't it? That's the point, right? Isn't it? So do whatever you want, live however you want, right? And we can see what the manifestations of that is, right? You can just walk through the city centre on a Saturday night, for example, and you'll see doing what you want, and when I'm saying animalistic, you'll see the animalistic, the animal to the animalistic of that point, right? Because it just happened to me a few weeks back where I was coming back from a friend's house. I was sat at the bus stop, and it was the city centre was full of alcoholics, and just to get to that bus stop, you've got a hot skip and jump, and just to keep your shoes clean, and that kind of we all know what we're talking about there, right? And I was sat there, and then this drunk man comes along, in light of all of these drunk men, and then he comes along and he goes next to this doorstep, and he starts urinating. So he starts urinating, and everyone's just. I'm thinking, what the? You'd expect it to happen, right? But when you see it, it's like it still disgusts you because you're used to the lifestyle where you're submitting to Allah, that kind of atmosphere. Yeah, you're aspiring to get to that level, and you see a man who's doing this, right? And urinate on someone's door, yeah. So, and I'm thinking, okay, let's see how people are reacting to this. And I'm looking around, and the only person that showed a hint of kind of resentment towards that was me, who was just pulling a bit of a face, and this woman next to me was pulling a bit of a face, and everyone else just looking over, thinking, oh, okay. Of course, for them it's a norm, isn't it? It's a norm. You're not gonna. It's not something that's not uncommon, right? Exactly. It's So this is it was a very normal thing. And just when we thought that was bad enough, like he's gone off, after he's made his contribution to society, right? And so he's gone off, and then two drunk women come along, and then I was thinking it couldn't get any worse than this, can it? And then two drunk women come along, laughing away, screaming away, and what have you. and they come along, and yeah, exactly. So after they've been liberated from the shackles of religion, and after what feminism and the lot has offered them, with their
progression,
they progress now because as a result of this, and they go and they see this puddle, and they sit in it. They sit in it, and not only that, but they sit in it, and they're taking selfies. so they're sitting there, they're taking their selfies, and then they start pushing themselves over onto it, right? They're pushing each other over. And then, they're sat there for quite a while, and I'm thinking, surely you're knowing what you're sitting there, because you're pushing each other into it, and you're laughing about it, and you're taking selfies on it, and then my bus comes, and I'm sat on it. This was after a while, because obviously at that time the buses are a bit slow, and they're still sat there. I look over the window, and they're still sat there. So what these ayahs do is it highlights this kind of self-destructive nature to the alternative to submitting your desires, exactly. It's highlighting the self-destructive nature of this jahiliyyah that's promoted. So after this self-destructive nature, it's basically showing that despite the opposition that you're going to put towards it, and despite all this fronting that you're going to do, right? Islam is this. You're going to have to put out lies there. When in reality, we all know the reality of this way of life, where you can put up this facade that your way of life is the best way of life,
of course,
but we've seen the reality, and sooner or later, one way or another, you're going to look back on that. At one point or another, you're going to look back and you're going to think, okay, I wasted a lot of my time here. I've practically wasted my life. Should I not have just been a bit honest with myself and thought, okay, let's be a bit open-minded about Islam, and let's actually look at it, and maybe I should have actually believed in the truth. So, yeah.
Jazakumullah, bro. That was very nice, bro. And inshallah, everybody else out there enjoyed it. And stay tuned for our daily revivers. Jazakumullah khair for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله